space won't really just be a destination. It'll be a real operating environment. Scores of hundreds of billions of dollars of economic value that's just up in geo and MEO today. The ability to go anywhere, anytime, efficiently, and importantly, at today's LEO launch cost points.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hypernova Fund podcast. I'm Grigorii Trubkin, managing partner at Hypernova. We're a seed to Series A venture fund focused on orbital infrastructure. And today I'm sitting down with Kerry Wisnosky. Correct me if I'm spelling it wrong.
No, correct.
So I think great. President and CEO of Quantum Space, company building what I believe is one of the most critical pieces of space infrastructure for the next era of space. You call it maneuverable spacecraft that operate beyond low Earth orbit in geo, cislunar space, and basically everywhere where the rest of the industry does not operate. So, yeah. So, Kerry, you're like 30-year aerospace veteran. You co-founded company before. It's called Millennium, and afterwards it was acquired. So with the quantum space, you started in 2023, I believe, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
2022. 2022.
What? 2022. Okay, great. But you did like great since then. And the main product called Ranger.
Yeah.
And just to start, I have like following question. So what pulled you into deep space infrastructure? So what was the moment you knew that, like that's kind of a company you want to build? Why it's like Geo, why it's not Leo? So
Thank you, Grigorio, and thanks for inviting me today. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the really exciting things we're doing here at Quantum Space. To kick it off, like in response to your question, I've actually spent most of my career, as you mentioned, in the space world, working on offensive and defensive space systems, and so applications. And so over time, I've evolved my thinking, if you will, to look at space and the market as from an architectural lens, right? So elements such as resiliency and cost efficiency and vulnerability and data services, like those kind of elements, and how do they fit into a system architecture in space, right? And one of the things that's interesting, if you look in the last 15 years of space, something really remarkable has happened. And people that the casual observer in space are probably generally aware, and even some of the space savvy people would take this position that the launch cost problem has largely been solved. And a lot of people believe that. When I say casual observers, even some of the space savvy people, they like to espouse that view. And look, what SpaceX entered the market back in 2010 with Falcon, and then some of the new entrants that are coming on like Rocket Lab and Stokes and others. The critical point that often gets overlooked is
Mhm.
that that is primarily true in low Earth orbit. And what's the result of that is that there's literally been, and we're going to see a lot of it this year, trillions of
Mhm.
dollars of enterprise value that was created in LEO, in this LEO infrastructure, all built on that infrastructure, starting off with getting the cost, a reasonable, acceptable cost to low Earth orbit, and then data services operating on top of that, if you think about it. Now, as we look beyond LEO, I would say for certain economic modeling, it's no longer a bet, it's inevitable. And why do I say that? We've seen over the last few years significant government and commercial efforts underway in orbits such as MEO and GEO and cislunar space. And obviously, when people hear lunar, they think of the moon, which obviously is an important part of our future in space. But there's also this vast region where there's lots of potential economic and strategic value of what the region between that's affected by the moon and Earth's gravity, and we call that cislunar space. One of the things that these customers are demanding in these orbits is long duration operations, maneuverability in orbits that, to be quite frank, the LEO infrastructure was never built for. And so
Mhm.
if you think about, the thousands and thousands of satellites in LEO, and again, if you go back to my architecture lens comment when I was starting with, things like data services, resiliency, flexibility, and vulnerability, they become risk factors in LEO with this plethora of spacecraft. And maybe we can touch on that in a little bit. But they're driving the space market towards deep space. That's really when it came clear to me that the opportunity wasn't just to build another satellite company. The opportunity was to build the foundation that unlocks the orbital economy. And that's the vision that ultimately became quantum space. And to kind of put a fine point on it, Grigory, I firmly
Mhm.
believe the next $1 trillion space economy, it's not going to be built on launch vehicles. It's going to be built on maneuverable infrastructure for the orbital economy.
It's great that you mentioned it. So, in all your previous talks, so you were saying that you're kind of a building Ranger as a maneuver first, right? It's like a
Yeah,
product.
yeah,
What does it actually mean in practice, and why it's so important? Why do you know, like constantly, like pointing this out?
yeah.
So,
Why is maneuvering? We've heard terms in the last 4 years, maneuver without regret. We've heard terms like dynamic space operations. Why are we hearing those terms? Because as you get into these other orbits outside of LEO and even within LEO, both on the commercial side and on the national security side, we see some very significant activities being done by our peer nations and some of our adversary nations that are causing us to really want to be able to maneuver. And let's dig into that. So, like, we're focused on is what I call the freedom to maneuver on demand. And what does that
mhm,
mean? It means giving our customers the ability to maneuver when they want, how they want, and then persist for extended periods of time and maybe do that again. So let me share a little context of how our Ranger and our IP is going to disrupt. We consider $100 billion orbital infrastructure market in the next few years. And
mhm,
again, as we mentioned on your previous question, like the cost of LEO, let's assume that's a palatable number. Okay, the cost of LEO, and even as we see these new entrant vehicles, they're very much focused on reusable to get their price points down. So getting to the LEO market, LEO drop you off, and it's up to you where you want to go. But what if you could get to these other orbits at the same cost as LEO? To put quantify it, it generally costs 10 times as much to go to orbits like geo or cislunar space or these MEO orbits as it does the cost to go to LEO. But what if you could get to those orbits at the same cost as LEO? And these orbits are quite challenging to get to, and the missions are very high value missions from both a commercial standpoint and the government. So what if you could go to these orbits and stay there for long periods of time, maybe up to 15 years? And
mhm.
what if you could do it while you're moving 10 times faster in today's satellites? What that would do is it would give your customers the ability to go anywhere, anytime, efficiently, and importantly, at today's LEO launch cost points. And I believe thereby will unlock and enable this new orbital economy. So we have the IP and the technology to do it. What's interesting is like today's satellites, they're designed around the assumption that they essentially go into one orbit and stay there. And reality is maneuvering is treated as a secondary function, right? Generally just enough propulsion for maybe some small station keeping maneuvers. Once the fuel runs out, the mission's over. That's today's satellites. But we know today's space environment's rapidly changing. On the commercial side, one of the things that's happened with this proliferation of LEO satellites, constellations have upended the geo business model, right? And so there's still scores of billion-dollar businesses that are being redefined to operate differently. That's just on the commercial side. And look, we know our adversaries are maneuvering. They're refueling. We've seen that. We've seen them refuel operational. We've seen them
And
do.
Chinese did it once at least, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
recently,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And we've seen repositioning, and we've seen them grab satellites and move them to other orbits. So customers are really asking for something very different than what they were just a few years ago. And essentially, that's why we're focused on this maneuverability.
I'm trying just to understand how is it possible. So you need like more delta V, you
Yeah,
need more fuel
yeah.
to go to higher orbits. Well, I mean, like it's pretty direct correlation. between how
Right.
much you spend in fuel and
Yeah.
where you can go. And you acquired this company called Phase 4, I
Yeah.
believe. Is this kind of a capability you have now? Is it like what will help you to, achieve this goal to decrease target price to go to geo close to what it takes to Leo?
The answer to that is what we're building here at Ranger, at Quantum Space, is our platform we call Ranger, our satellite platform. It's not a tug or a middleman. It's not like taking your spacecraft to an orbit, from Leo to Geo or cislunar and dropping you off and disappearing. So we're designing a 6,000 kilogram spacecraft that 4,000 kilograms of that is chemical fuel.
Which is
So
huge, yes. So
huge.
in
Yeah.
comparison to other satellites sent into
Yeah.
orbit, so it's like how much bigger? It's like 2, 3 times bigger, right?
Well, I
So
mean, like if you were thinking of a Starlink, maybe today they're 600 kilograms, maybe they're going to 800. So, it's 10 times the mass of a typical 5 or 600 kilogram spacecraft that most people do.
okay,
But
got it.
but what's really important is we have the largest capacity to carry storable propellant. And storable is important because it means you can stay up on orbit for long periods of time. That's how we can stay up on orbit for up to 15 years. The thing with this company, Phase 4, that you mentioned, is they had some technology called multimode propulsion, game changer in the satellite market. What multimode enables you to take this chemical fuel and for the very first time, use that chemical fuel to generate electric propulsion. So there's companies that are building chemical
Mhm,
propulsion. I mean, look, it's basically look at a rocket launch. What comes out of the bottom of it is
mhm,
chemical fuel. And then there's companies that once they're up on orbit, they want to just maneuver very little bit, very efficiently, like Starlink would be that. They have electric
mhm.
propulsion. So for the first time, without having to carry two separate systems, we're able to generate electric propulsion or chemical propulsion with a single fuel. And that's what's really disrupting the industry, along with our ability and how we're designing our propulsion systems to essentially carry a lot of fuel. And then finally, in terms of what's really disruptive about our IP and how we're developing in it, inherently in how we're building it is the ability to refuel. So we've seen now, 5 years ago, there was a lot of speculation. Now we see early in some of the national security upcoming procurements, the government is asking for you have to be able to refuel spacecraft. Because we have so much fuel, we actually conserve the purpose of a fuel depot. So, think of about an aircraft carrier that is a tanker. We now can provide that capability to the market.
Got it, got it. And so do you need like some special, like connectors to be installed on your potential customers' vehicles, or it will be some kind of universal?
Well, I mean, we're not focused on the interface. So
Mhm,
there's at least 4 companies we're aware of that are building sort of interfaces to sort of mate up with. And because of the
mhm,
way we design our spacecraft, even talking to the government, they're saying, let's be agnostic to that right now. Whether it's a company, one of the large aerospace companies are doing it, or a couple of the newer space companies, and we have various ports on our vehicle. We could have one of the, a different valve to based on what particular interface that a satellite has.
Okay, got it. Understood. Yeah, so now let's talk about like kind of a military side. Everyone is chasing this, at least part of this 185 billion budget that was announced, right? And Space Force budget also ballooning. So Pentagon just announced 10 billion for space capabilities alone. What is the quantum space role in next generation missile defense, and how urgent is the threat environment right now? What do you think here?
Yeah. Your question is about essentially missile defense, Golden Dome, particularly.
Will you kind of, yeah. So do you plan that your Ranger vehicle will be part of it? So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
how do you foresee
Yeah.
it? It's like, are you focusing on this,
Yeah.
or it's like a side hustle? So what is
Yeah.
it?
Well, I mean, look, every space company is looking at the technology they're developing, whether it's legacy technology or something new, and how that might get applied. This is a big challenge that the country needs to take on. And I, for one, who spent at least 20 years of my career in missile defense, working for some of the large aerospace companies, and then on the government side, I have like a deep appreciation for the complexity of the problem and the threat. So like if we think about what's happened the last 20 years in missile defense, essentially the priority was around two things, right? It was a rogue ICBM type threat from maybe a country like North Korea defending our homeland against that. And then the other critical focus area was our forward deployed forces and our allies, right? And protecting them against short and medium range threats. And look, we've seen in the last year in the Middle East the importance of focusing on that second and the success that we've had both from land and from sea in that area. But if you think about what's happening next in missile defense and in Golden Dome, the next architecture really is going to integrate sensors, command control, interceptors, and look, it's going to be increasingly reliant on space-based systems, right? That's just the nature of the complexity of threats. Why is that? Because the threats have gotten way more sophisticated. We're now dealing with maneuvering reentry vehicles. We're now dealing with hypersonics, right? We're dealing with really sophisticated decoys. And importantly, we're now dealing with a potential threat where it's not 10 or 20 threats or targets or engagements coming with this, where it can be hundreds or more than that, or, for some of these countries that we know what capability they're building. So back to my comment earlier that by and large, satellites that are in LEO are very vulnerable, right? Their orbits are very predictable. They have very limited maneuverability and capability. So we see our Ranger platform with our large maneuvering capability and the ability to host multiple interceptors, right, on a single Ranger vehicle, or host sensors that can be used for battle management or sensing that help the missile defense challenge create a more resilient architecture. I think that's where the real development effort's going to be, is in the resiliency of the architecture, and that's how I think about these things. And a simple way to kind of finish it off, and the way we've been talking to the customers over in those agencies about is we're traditionally, and even in today's engagements, we're doing man-to-man defense, right? Single interceptor engage a single threat. With Ranger, we can play more zone defense. We have lots of fuel capability. We actually can even refuel on board that spacecraft, so we can reposition our assets and engage a larger swath, if you will, of the battlefield.
So you see it basically as a backbone of, like more complex architecture. So and you can
Yeah,
do
I
like a lot
mean,
of stuff inside of.
yeah, I mean, backbone might be a little strong. Look, the government is going to define how they want to do that architecture, but we think it adds significant resiliency and capability, and that's how we're approaching it at this point. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Well, let's talk about traction you have now in terms of, like comparisons, like where do you expect more demand, like on the military side or on commercial side? Who is like potential customers from, it's like truly commercial space economy?
We've seen in the history, and even we talk about these, what's happened in space in the last, you can go back from the beginning of the space, is generally the governments are the investors of disruptive technology. We've seen that. Then what happens is commercial businesses coalesce around that. And with the ingenuity and creativity, they generate business markets, commercial business markets because of that capability that's been put in place. And again, we saw that in the first wave when SpaceX got Falcon in the market, and then there was like, SATCOM and Earth imaging. And then as the price went down, then proliferation of constellations came in place for SATCOM. So I share that because tech space companies, what you naturally find is that you have a vision of where you're going to go and where you see you're a startup company. I think of the B&P, and a lot of people think B&P is bid and proposal in business, but when you're a startup, B&P is bold and prudent. So you have to have a
Oh,
bold vision, right? But you have to be prudent
I
in
like it.
how you're focusing and building your technology. And so for us, we focused on is let's lay out our product roadmap strategy, get this Ranger maneuvering capability with our IP to the market to serve these orbits and customers. As we made technical progress, I would say a couple of years ago, we started bidding on some contracts. We got some small contracts with some commercial customers. We won contracts with groups like the Space Development Agency. And if you remember Mars, NASA came out with this Mars sample return alternative. They were looking for commercial solutions. We won some of those awards. And generally, Grigorii, at that point, like we were getting indications from the market, hey, we like your ideal. Tell us a little bit about it, right? They weren't like, go build it. It's like, can you tell us a little more about it? We saw in 25 is just in the last year, we've been awarded close to $90 million of contracts, which are, oh no, we really are interested in this. There's an urgent need to build this vehicle. So when we talk about traction, just in the last 3 years, we were awarded a contract from the Air Force Research Lab to develop some of this technology for cislunar space. We were awarded a contract from the Department of War, directly from the Department of War, to look at building a fuel depot to go demonstrate it in GEO. And most recently, we've been awarded a contract from DARPA to, again, operate in one of these high value orbits. So we're seeing really strong demand signals from the government because of these urgent needs. Now, we also know that the government has future multi-billion dollar opportunities that they're going to be looking at because of the importance of these orbits and these markets and these capabilities. And to your point of the commercial markets, look, there's scores of hundreds of billions of dollars of economic value that's just up in GEO and MEO today. Things like GPS operates in MEO, which a lot of people don't really appreciate. And there's, lots of satellite and TV communication and data services and comm services that operate in GEO. And many of those companies are looking at what orbits are they going to operate in the future? And are they going to stay in GEO? Can they extend their life in GEO so that they can continue generating revenue, or looking at constellations in MEO or cislunar space? So the way we look at it is strong demand signal on the government side, and that's enabling us to build this infrastructure that's going to be critical for the commercial markets as well.
Okay, got it. I'm gonna put on my VC hat now and ask you like a very VC question. There are a lot of competitors on this market also, like Lockheed Martin, like Boeing, so well-established players, right? What makes it possible for Quantum, like to make better proposals to get government funding and to, I don't know, like DARPA to Department of War, whatever.
Yeah.
How do you win this competition?
Let me start off by saying I spent a healthy part of my career working for a lot of those large aerospace companies, and they're incredibly capable organizations and, decades of experience. And sometimes they have a plethora of resources, right? A lot more than a company like us. We don't win by looking like them, right? Having previously started and successfully exited another aerospace company in the past, and how we're focused here at Quantum Space is by being, I know it sounds like silly to say we move faster, but we actually do. We move faster and we're more focused. And the thing that's really important is we're more willing to design around the next generation of space missions, like infrastructure needs. It's a really an important distinction instead of designing around the last or current ones. A lot of these large, really super successful companies, they call them traditional for a reason because they have capability and legacy, but for them to design for the next generation sometimes becomes quite challenging. I would say, like your question from our investor standpoint, like the investors who've invested in Quantum Space, they firmly believe in our product we're taking to the market. And we've seen this, like I said, through these contracts that we're getting awarded and their financial commitments. The thing that's interesting when I talk about these contracts that we've been awarded, the 4 or 5, every single one of them, we've competed against those large aerospace primes, and we're winning. So counting our board and our executive team here, look, I've spent a big part of my career bidding and working on government contracts and understanding like what's important to win. So, collectively, we've won multiple billions of dollars of contracts and other entities, to be fair, but those relationships and understanding what the customer needs are critically important. The final thing I would say about how do we win and compete is our culture, and I would expect if you're talking to another startup, we tend to attract people who want to work on the hardest problems in the industry, right? I mean, just by definition, you're changing the market. So our team is really motivated to build something that's fundamentally new, with these spacecraft that can operate across these orbits beyond LEO, essentially the same price point. So I would say the combination of focusing on speed and culture really enables us not only compete, but to really win effectively as we need to. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. So basically, maneuverability, but in some different sense, helps you to win all these contracts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
great, great. Understood. So let's talk about what's next for quantum space.
yeah.
I mean, like the biggest next milestone is your launch somewhere this year. Can you tell a little bit about like what mission it will be and what do you expect from it? What are the next steps?
Yeah. So essentially, the whole company is relentlessly focused on getting this product to the market. We had done an initial mission back in 2024. We did a launch of a spacecraft just to kind of get our team. You can build satellites everywhere in your life, but when you put a team together, you want them to work integrating together. So we put a satellite up in 2024, smaller satellite, get our team integrated and start getting comfortable building a spacecraft and operating it. Right now, we're focused on getting this Ranger. The end of this year, we anticipate having the vehicle fully integrated and assembled. We're also focused this year on, we talked a little bit earlier about our multi-mode, and we have 14 patents that we've already have in our coffers. And so getting that technology and IP matured so that it's on a path to go into our product as we enter the market, that's really an important function that we have going on this year. So we'll have the vehicle fully assembled by the end of this year, do our environmental and launch integration early next year. And right now, our plans are we're slated to launch on a SpaceX, transporter mission middle of 27. Now, the important thing is in 28, we're going to be doing this refueling demonstration mission as part of our infrastructure offering. I mentioned earlier that we have this contract with the Department of War to do this fuel depot. So right on the heels of this, getting our Ranger demonstration mission that we call Ranger Prime in 27, we'll be doing a fuel depot demonstration in early 28. What that'll do is we're working now to do Ranger product sales in 2028 as we build out this because customers are interested in really buying the product, and then other customers are interested in the data services that we're offering, which we expect to get them in full bore into the market around, the end of the decade, 2030 timeline.
Nice. Very impressive. Cool. Cool. Can't wait. I have two more questions for you, and they're, like a little bit visionary. Let's zoom out. And you several times mentioned such a term as like space superhighway,
Yeah.
I believe. Let's look like 20 years ahead, and we have all these LEO destinations, geo destinations, cislunar destinations, and eventually deep space connected. What place in this infrastructure does Ranger takes, or any other product? I don't know, like next generation of Ranger.
Today, satellites still are mostly single-use systems, right? They get up there, they have one function, and then they do their mission, and then they put up another one. I believe in 20 years, the space superhighway will operate the way Amazon operates here on the Earth, where there'll be sort of data services and infrastructure. I mean, that's what Amazon does. That's what they've put in place in the last 20 years. I believe that will manifest itself, and we plan to be the backbone of that. Things like spacecraft transporting payloads between orbits, refueling and servicing and hosting multiple missions on a single platform. That would be critical. Beyond LEO, I think clearly in 20 years, for the first time in history, space won't really just be a destination. It'll be a real operating environment. That's how I think about it. And we'll be leading and operating at the infrastructure layer of that.
Okay, understood. So probably last question I have, it's more kind of a, philosophical one. Is there any belief about space economy and future of it you have that most of people in the industry does not agree with you?
Let's see. We started this discussion about the importance of launch, right? A long time industry believed the biggest problem in space was launch, right? I mean, I think that's a belief. And as we've talked about, people would say, or we would say, that the launch problem, if you will, to LEO has been solved. Lower launch cost was incredibly important. It unlocked the first wave of the space economy. And then, like again, there's new entrants that are going to be come on that I believe are going to keep the launch cost at the right cost point. But when you say, is there something that I believe that maybe a lot of people don't believe in the space? But I think the next wave is going to be defined by what happens after launch to LEO. I think that's going to be the
Mhm.
next wave of the space economy.
It's
Things that
basically
are,
what you're focusing on.
yeah, mobility, refueling, this persistent infrastructure will define the next. I think it's going to define not just what we're focused on, but the next generation of space companies. Like the way, think about it, is launch gets you to orbit, but infrastructure determines what you can do once you're there. And I think that shift's happening right now. And fortuitous for us, it's happening right towards us. And that's what we've been focused on over these last 3 or 4 years. And we're built for this. So that's how I think about what I really consider is going to be this new orbital foundation economy and the infrastructure that needs to be built for that.
Got it. But what's your bets? It's like when orbital refueling will become like a routine stuff, not a big deal. It's like just repetitive, regular process, like they on a daily basis.
I feel
Yeah.
10 years, these things take time. There's going to be some demonstrations in the next couple of years. We're going to do one, but putting the infrastructure into the market, I mean, yeah, there's interface valves. Again, don't want to get into details, but how we're designing our propulsion system uniquely enables us to be equipped to refuel multiple types of spacecraft. But I generally feel, there's a time where you demonstrate it and then you have to put it into the market and it gets accepted by both the government and the commercial. I feel like that's going to be 10 years.
Okay, got it. Understood. So, Kerry, thank you so much for this conversation. It was incredible. Thanks for your, vision. Thanks for your wisdom for sharing this with us. I wish all the quantum space good luck and hope you guys will build successfully what you're building and will become, like a backbone of new space economy. So
Super.
yeah,
Thank you very much for the invitation and looking forward to keeping you informed as we make incredible progress. Thanks, Grigorii.
absolutely. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Kerry. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cheers.